So, a very warm welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar to mark the occasion of World Alzheimer's Day. We're very lucky to have a distinguished group of panelists to discuss a very important topic today, the role of society in early detection of dementia. To introduce myself, I'm Dr. Jayashree Das Gupta. I'm the co-founder and project director of Samvedna Senior Care. And Samvedna has been working since the past several years in the areas of dementia care, mental health of older adults, and active aging. And we're extremely passionate about spreading more awareness about dementia and definitely encouraging earlier detection to help dementia, people living with dementia, as well as their caregivers. We're extremely honored to have a distinguished panel of experts who will be discussing this very important topic today. Our first panelist is Dr. Debanjun Banerjee. He's completed his MD and DM in geriatric psychiatry from the very esteemed National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. He's been attached with the geriatric unit for over 5 years and is currently a consultant in Kolkata. He's won several awards throughout his academic career and is on the editorial board of several reputed national as well as international journals, including the Frontiers in Psychiatry, Journal of Psychosexual Health, and the Indian Journal of Social Psychiatry. He's also a regular medical fact checker and a member of Health Analytics Asia. So warm welcome to you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Sukanya Ray. She's an assistant professor at the School of Human Ecology at the prestigious Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She's an experienced clinical psychologist and has over 15 years of experience in diverse areas. She holds an MPhil degree from the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. And amongst some of the very interesting work that she has done at TIS, she started a diploma course in trauma-focused therapy, and she's also leads several research projects. And she has a keen interest in neurobiology of behavior, and her specialized training in trauma therapy gives her an edge in understanding the role of psychosocial factors in traumatic stress. So a warm welcome to you, Sukanya. Our third panelist for today is Vidya Shenoy ma'am, and she's an integrative therapist and dementia care specialist. She's also the Secretary General of the Alzheimer's and Related Disorders Society of India and Honorary Secretary of the Mumbai chapter. She's the founder of Smriti Vishwam, Universe of Memory Specialized Dementia Daycare Center, and a member of the Maharashtra State Mental Health Authority. Due to some conflicting engagements, she's going to be joining in a little later, but we're very honored to have her as part of the panel as well. So a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us once again. And I would have loved to go through a round of introductions with everyone who's joined us, because I think with the topic that we're really talking about is something we're all a part of. But since we can't do that, I thought we'd do a quick poll question to just understand, what is your interest? Why are you actually joining this webinar today? So, Archana, if I could request for the first question to be put up. What is it that's made you interested to even think about the role of society in dementia? It's very interesting to see that this year there's a lot of talk about dementia, a lot of talk about Alzheimer's disease. And this is something which is a welcome change for people, I think, who are part of the field. I know we have a very diverse mix of people joining in today. So, Archana, could I request you to please share that first question? And perhaps whilst we're waiting for that, those of you who are interested to just type in your responses in the chat, please go ahead and do that. so that we can actually understand what it is that what is it that you see as your role in society, and what is it that you feel would be the reasons why you could play a role in promoting the awareness about dementia or early detection of dementia. So I think, so thank you so much, Abhilasha. We said that you create products and services for Alzheimer's disease and dementia patients. Okay, that's wonderful. So maybe whilst, let me just jump straight in otherwise and ask Dr. Debanjun, what exactly is dementia? Maybe, I'm sure there may be some people who are not aware of that. Could you just help us understand what this is?
Yeah, hi, Jashi. Am I audible now?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, I was not able to unmute myself. So, yeah. So, yeah, a warm welcome to all our participants, and thanks for having me on board today. Um, Even though it's World Alzheimer's Day, I always start by mentioning that it's about a life. It's not about a day or a month. But definitely days like us give us the opportunity to come together and discuss issues relevant to such a global problem. To simplify, the concept of dementia, I think the best way to put it is it's a progressive illness which affects both the brain and the mind and behavior. Uh, it affects, it happens due to both changes in the structure and function of our brain. And of course, age is one of the most important risk factors, but not the only one. And there are different types of dementia. Now, we usually classify it in technical terms based on the type of the abnormal protein that gets deposited in certain areas of brain. But to be very generic, most of the times it is associated with a steady decline of memory. But it is not just about memory and aging. So it's also associated with a decline in thoughts, behavior, judgment, understanding, uh, socially appropriate behavior. And it progresses through different stages. So it's not that one fine day, one fine morning a person gets up and starts developing dementia. It's a slow process, and there is a large window before we really can clinically detect the symptoms. And that window gives us an immense opportunity to intervene, to understand, and lastly, just by a couple of points, we are talking about Alzheimer's dementia today, which is the commonest form of dementia. But it's not only an Indian scenario, it's a global problem. So, we all know that based on all the latest reports by ADI, by the LASI, uh, globally, almost, every year, there are 10 million cases of all causes dementia that happen. And with our rapidly aging population, I think the burden should really be concerning, because this is not really an illness that affects an individual, but as you aptly put the title of today's discussion, it affects the families, the relatives, the society as a large, and has a huge socio-economic burden on all of us. So understanding and, that is the theme of this year's World Alzheimer's Month, that if we really have to understand Alzheimer's, we have to understand what dementia is, and that is probably the way forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banerjee. And I think you've really raised a whole host of very important issues. Um, Unfortunately, I think we're facing a bit of a technical glitch, so I apologize for that. We would love to have some, poll questions for the audience to also contribute as part of this discussion. But not to worry, we do have a backup, and I think the chat box is going to serve that purpose. So please do continue to share your thoughts in the chat. Let us know the response to the first question. Help us understand what it is. What is your interest in dementia? Is this just something that is relevant for older adults, or is this something that's relevant to everybody in society? And I want to just move to you, Sukanya, and just ask you, what do you think some of the reasons why there may be, we're talking so much about what are some of the reasons for that?
Sorry, Jayashree, I think my connection dropped for a bit. Let's repeat that question.
Sorry. Okay, I was going to ask you about what are some of the reasons why we see a delay in detection. But I think I've just got a message saying that we want to give it one last shot to see if we can try the poll. So let's keep our fingers crossed and let's see if we can get up our poll question and have members of the audience also participate in this. So could we try the poll question once again, please? So I'm afraid we're not able to see the poll questions. So maybe
I was actually able to see it, Jayashree.
Actually, I think we are able to see it. I'm seeing the responses also. So
okay, that's wonderful. Then in that case, maybe Archana, you could help me by just sharing what the responses are, because I think it's a problem then on my side. I'm not able to see that. I apologize for that.
yeah, so we'll just wait for a couple of seconds for people to just vote. Yeah. Okay. Can everybody see the results?
Yes, please.
Yes. I think Jayashree, you can't see because you're the co-host.
Great. So maybe I could turn to you, Sukanya,
Yeah.
and you could share your thoughts.
Sure. Well, I think that's a great question, and we've got a whole round of different kinds of reasons what has brought people today, and that's lovely to see. I think it's very interesting to see how something which is so neurocognitive, something that is so brain-based, can actually lead to so much of difficulties in terms of social interaction. So to start with, I just want to sort of highlight this core issue, and since I'm trained in the something called interpersonal neurobiology, which is a line of thought, which is a school of trauma therapy also that's been started by Dr. Daniel Siegel. So we tend to look at the human brain as just an organ that is supposed to do all kinds of operations inside the cranium. But that's quite not the case, because the brain is what enables us to interact socially. So essentially, the brain is a social organ. So when we look at how the brain kind of gets wired in different kinds of populations, in a society like ours, which is very relational, which is collectivistic in nature, so our brains also get wired through our upbringing in terms of being more based in relationships, more based in family relationships, more based in the family and community context. So what happens when anyone from our circles, is diagnosed with this kind of an illness, which is perceived as more brain-based? Because commonly we don't hold this understanding that the brain is actually a social organ. We tend to think that something neurological it doesn't have a cure, or that it's kind of degenerative in all senses of the word, and that it's only going to lead to more decline, and we cannot work on any kind of modifiable factors surrounding it. So I think it's that narrative which can lead to a lot of delay in terms of both detection and seeking help as well. But there could be a whole lot of other factors as well, including that how do we look at old age? And what are the perceptions around the person, who's becoming more and more dependent on their family as they are aging? Because as a culture, we tend to sort of look at the family context and the relational context of the individual as the strengths of our culture. And I wonder, and I was, going through some articles as well that talk about how this perception could interestingly be very subliminally also influencing our policies. So maybe the lack of focus on community and a lot more policies that are more socially focused, policies that are more socially driven, is that missing from our culture, which is collectivistic, is because that family is given so much of importance in terms of managing the care of the elderly. So is that the missing piece that we are sort of looking at? And I think as professionals, we also tend to see that the caregivers themselves go through a lot of burden in terms of both emotional turmoil, distress, lack of support, and just that space, sort of what we call as empathic distress, what earlier used to be known as compassion fatigue. So I think those are very important spaces to consider to understand what are the factors. Is it just the lack of awareness? Or are these factors also contributing to a sense of stigma, a sense of shame? That if my family member is detected with this disease, does it mean that I didn't take care enough? I wasn't responsible enough. So is that sort of leading to more self-help behaviors? Is that leading to more, I can fix it by myself? Is it making people shy away from taking help or reaching out to the correct sources? So I'm not saying that this is the only reason. I'm saying that these could be compounding the reasons that there is lack of awareness. There's lack of visibility in terms of organizations they can contact, the support that is supposed to be there, and even policies that are shaping up. I think there's a lot of lack of awareness that's also compounding the problem. But I feel the social fabric itself might be complicating the picture. So it's probably time that we look within in terms of how do we continue to view old age. And as a society, how do we view old age, and how do we view people who might be sort of who might be a little more vulnerable than just being elder? So I think some of the spaces are there, but I think that's also something you would love to hear from the audience as well. What would be the perceptions?
Absolutely. And I mean, thank you for raising so many, touching upon some very diverse points, Sukanya. And you've brought in, I mean, you really touched upon the role of individuals, the role of the family, and even up to the role of the policy really has to play in the way that we view some of these things. I know that most of the people who have joined us today actually know somebody who has dementia. And I'm interested to understand from those of you who are joining in today, what is it that you think are the reasons for a delay in detection? So, Archana, if I could request you to share the next poll question, I'd really like to hear from everyone what they think are the reasons for late detection.
Sure. It's launched.
Great. So do have a look at the options. Of course, if there's something in there if there's some other reason, we've captured a few. But if there's something else, please do type that in the chat box, because we'd really like to know what your thoughts are and understand what we can do to change. So we have an interesting comment that some symptoms. Okay, so there are, I think from the poll, as you could have all seen, the lack of awareness is probably the reason that most people feel it contributes to a delay in early detection, and followed by social stigma and a lack of support, and not really knowing where to go for help. I'd like to open this to both of you. A lot of people in the chat have mentioned that 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 we think of dementia symptoms as really being a part of old age, but there's also a concept of ageism. Do you think that does this have a role to play in late detection? Maybe I could begin with Dr. Banerjee.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the responses that we saw, and what Sukanya was also mentioning, the relational aspect of it. In fact, it's sometimes very subtle. So, World Health Organization has very clearly mentioned that we should stop referring to terms such as elderly, seniors, older, aged, and stuff like that. But if you just see in the popular literature or in the regular literature that we come across, these terms are often used. Now, many times, you may wonder that what's there in a term, but it is how we perceive, age, or it is our own fear of aging, or let's say, quote unquote, senility, or equating age, unidirectionally equating age with perishing, death, being ugly, and not being productive, is what is the core of our ageist thinking, or the prejudice that happens. In fact, very ironically, that we are discussing today, I think some of you may be aware that of the upcoming ICD-11, there is a huge debate because old age has been put into a pathological criteria in a couple of places. And the gerontological, the geriatric psychiatric societies of all across have raised a voice together to mention that it should be replaced with frailty, because that's a more appropriate concept, because that, even though the World Health Organization does not intend to mean that old age is in general pathological, but with the existing baseline stigma, this may further exacerbate the crevices of our misconceptions. So, there are different bodies. In fact, we from the International Psychogeriatric Association, from the World Psychiatric Association section of Old Age Psychiatry, have repeatedly written letters requesting the WHO to withdraw this, or at least have a statement explaining that what they intend to mean. Now, with that background, if you really see, as Sukanya aptly mentioned, it's not just lack of awareness. I think lack of awareness is kind of a very generic term which helps us understand, or kind of makes it easy for us to explain. But if you really see in the society, many of them come to seek help when the behavioral problems start becoming too much. So let's say somebody is agitated, somebody is not sleeping at night. So that is the part where the family dynamics, the relational dynamics, the status quo of the family gets disrupted. And the family feels that now we should seek help. But the same thing may or may not happen if the memory issues, start off. And the corollary to that is, it's also important that what role do we expect a person above 60 years to play in a society? So when we are talking about society here, many times we hear this from patients. I'm sure Jayashree will agree with me on this, that, usually grandma used to just be in her room or just watch TV or do puja, and, we really didn't find a difference in her. So the concept of autonomy, the concept of independence with aging, the concept of healthy aging, and more importantly, dignity. I think these are terms which really need to come in our discourse and in our interventions. And that's why, probably because even though we have had a renewed Mental Health Act 2017, we had the renewed Right to Disabilities Act, but still there are significant lacunae, which do not talk about old age, people who are aging, and people who can age with independence. And I think it's very pertinent that we are having a dialogue today, because you know that the UN has declared the decade of healthy aging, 2021 to 2030. So I think let's all, at least whoever is there in the audience, everybody, irrespective of whether they're a caregiver or they're living with dementia themselves, or they have heard about Alzheimer's, they can actually take a proactive step as being an advocate for healthy aging and for re-visualizing or re-understanding aging as something that's a process, rather than attaching an automatic negative connotation to it. I think that's where the care of dementia starts, not when a person lands up to the clinic having a memory problem.
And thank you so much for raising that point so emphatically, because it is a real irony, and I'm sure there are so many professionals also who've joined us today, that by the time a family reaches the clinic, the patient is already at a point which is, a moderate to advanced stage of dementia. And essentially there's been a loss of so many years where things could have been done very differently. You've touched upon a lot of different aspects, right, from the kind of language that we're using and how that can also in turn contribute to some of the ways, these sort of delays, to the ways in which, at a policy level and certain frameworks that we're actually using to work with older adults is also in a way stigmatizing, or, and adds to the problem itself. But I just want to turn to Sukanya and ask one aspect. Dr. Banerjee gave an example of the grandmother doing puja, and we know from a lot of research that there are women, a lot more women have dementia, and also, I just want you to comment, Sukanya, maybe on whether you see gender also as being, where do you see gender in all of this? From the perspective not only of the patient, but also from this perspective of caregivers, because we know that by default, most often it is women in the family who become the natural caregivers. So could you just throw some light on in terms of what do you feel, where does gender come into all of this?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering, as Dr. Banerjee was also speaking, that the whole idea of dignity and healthy aging that we are talking about, um, this is a scientific discourse. Because when we look at our cultural discourse, the discourse is not surrounding healthy aging, and the way we look at aging is more about how parents are supposed to become dependent on the children or the next generation, and how the children or the next generation is supposed to care for the elderly in the house, or the grandmother or the grandfather as well. Now, in there is something what we call as intersectionality. So here is one person is who is in the advanced years of life, and cultural dictates have kind of reinforced the role of them being dependent on the next generation. So what has really happened in here is perhaps that this person has been disempowered in an intersectional manner. So they have been disempowered not only for being an individual in the advanced years of life, but also for being a lady of the house. So, being a woman is disempowering by itself. So throughout their lives, they have not had their sense of agency, or not had the space to actually maybe report certain health issues, or when they might be sensing the subtlest of any signs of, health being an issue, they would bottle it up. They would not really sort of seek help. So that has been there, that discourse has been there in the family, in their personal lives all throughout. And now in the advanced stage of life, because there's the sense of being a burden to the family and being not having the agency, not having the sense of empowerment, being dependent, I think that perhaps cascades all of that. That, even there could be early signs, but then being the woman of the house, they might not be wanting to bring that up, not wanting to further be a burden on the family members. And for the family members as well, like I said, that taking care of the elderly people in the house, do we sort of take extra caution to note for any other subtleties that we see in the elderly women in the house? Because we are also used to the elderly women in the house being caregivers all their lives. We are compassionate to them, but we're also used to them not complaining. We're also used to them not being in the limelight at all, but the male persons in the house being the limelight. So gender could certainly play a role. Also, like I've been saying, that our brains are actually wired by our own experiences. So experiences within the family, experiences within society. So our brains are wired by the experiences as well as the learnings that we have. So all these social learnings that, social conditioning that's been happening throughout our lives as well, might also play a role in terms of the person's own stigma and in terms of being able to recognize certain signs as well as a sign of disease. So, maybe the sign of disease, which may be read as an early sign of dementia, might be perceived by the individual as, nothing at all, just a sign of aging, just a sign that, I'm becoming more and more vulnerable, just a sign that I'm becoming less and less powerful. So, I'm just becoming a burden. So I think those narratives around the cultural discourse on aging needs to be revisited. But that, of course, like Dr. Banerjee said, that's a Herculean task. Perhaps it needs to start at our own homes. Because one way of it is to actually, for each of us to unlearn at our own level what healthy aging is and where does that continuum sort of, merge into dementia. And the other part of it is for society to unlearn and relearn as well of how to sort of give the space to people who might be experiencing anything at all. It may not be dementia at all, but is it okay for them to also sort of, continue to have that dignity and that sense of empowerment of their own lives? I think that discourse needs to change. Apart from the fact that there needs to be more public policies, dementia needs to become a more public health-centered, um, you know, um, and the whole idea of community being there and what is the role of community in detection and support at different levels. How can community be involved in terms of awareness programs, in terms of detection, in terms of psychosocial support, not just for the individual who's going through it, but also the caregivers? So that, and I think that the other part of it could also come from the fact that women can be incredibly shy in terms of seeking help for their gendered roles, A. And two, like I said, because of that intersectionality, there might be sort of more bottling up, which is why we often see a lot of comorbidities as well with women, in this stage of life, because they're bottling up just so much. And that's probably coming from that space of stigmatizing their own selves.
Jayashree, just in continuation to that, if I may. So, as Sukanya was mentioning, I just kept thinking about this, that till we kind of in terms of mental health, when we say that, and a few days back when we had this World Suicide Prevention Day programs, almost in every single discussion, I kind of felt like this, that as long as we consider mental health or aging to be something very exotic to be discussed at, one particular point of time or one particular point of time in life, and not as a continuum, I think, there is really no solution to it. Because as we all age, as the family dynamics, the family hierarchy, the family power systems balance, all of these changes, I think it's a process. It's and that's why probably it's research proven that how if you work on intergenerational bonds, you can actually work on ageism and elder abuse. It's an evidence-based intervention. Now, though we are discussing this on a Global Awareness Day, I think it will be at least my message or my own personal pledge. Like Sukanya mentioned, that charity begins at home. We cannot tell about global societal things to happen till we really do not take a small steps in ourselves. So to consider, the process of aging, how an older adult has his or her rights, how gender roles do not really come and in the pathway of seeking care, and how understanding the nuances of what is uh, what are the signs of aging versus what are the early signs of detection of Alzheimer's. This needs to happen as kind of a process or a kind of a daily life business. It cannot happen that one fine day I will step in and then start considering the rights of the older adults in our family. So this is just what I wanted to share, because this is something which I have always felt as a mental health professional, which really impedes our attempt for early detection.
Jayashree, if I may just kind of extend that discussion a little bit, I think we are at a very critical, very sensitive kind of a point of acknowledging something which is almost like a underlying problem in our modern societies. And I think it defines why we look at old age in a very discrete manner. We sort of tend to think that there's midlife and then you step into old age, vis-a-vis looking at it as a continuum. I mean, all of us start aging the day we are born. So, it is a continuum all our lives. So, I think one thing that really plagues society, modern society, since the time of the Industrial Revolution is death denial. I think that's something that is at the core of this discourse. And even though we are a culture where death denial is not supposed to be part of our discourse at all, but somehow it has crept in. I think we need to think deeper about this.
And I think
I
these
think
are all.
COVID
So I
COVID
was
has
going to, in
made us
fact,
think.
ask that exactly. That I mean, how has
Yeah.
COVID really impacted this entire discourse? I mean, I know a lot of what we're talking about is really re-looking the way that we're, thinking about aging, and how that's really playing a fundamental role in terms of delaying possibly the detection of a disorder like dementia. And from the statistics, as you're probably all aware, I mean, this is, the rates of dementia are set to triple in the, by 2050. So unless, is that enough time to change the discourse? I hear you all saying that we need to do this from today, but what is it that we need? What is it that we need to really do? Dr. Banerjee and both of you mentioning a lot about intergenerational work. How has COVID also kind of contributed to this? Because one of the things that we've seen through our work is that COVID has had an impact on families in very diverse ways. It's either kept families, it's either widened the distance between families because of travel restrictions, etc., or it's brought them too close, which has come with its own set of dynamics. And I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on this. And I also welcome Vidyaji, who's just joined us. Maybe, in fact, Vidyaji, could I ask you to perhaps share your thoughts on this first?
Have you asked me a question?
So we were talking about how COVID has really impacted families in different ways, particularly with regards to dementia. We've seen that either it's just created a lot of distance, or it's also brought families closer together, which in some cases come with its own set of dynamics. could you share your thoughts on the impact of COVID?
Yeah. Okay. Firstly, I'm a diehard optimist. Okay. So I would dig and delve and find goodness in every situation. Okay. For me, COVID has been very positive, where my family with dementia is concerned. I find that, in our daycare, we always had a problem of having them concentrate, okay, get focus. And they would look at a phone or they'd look at the iPad and say, what is this? But COVID had us start online services, which I'd never dreamt of, frankly. It sort of made us think much harder as to what we can do for them, since they are not going out and they're in the walls of the home, they're seeing the same faces, no social interaction, which they were used to for almost 6.5 years. So we started working on that, on the online thing, by sending surprise packages of goodies plus craft and materials that they could use online when we have our sessions. So we, they were, of course, each one had their own tongue taste, okay? Some liked salty, some liked sweet, and invariably it's the diabetic people who need the sweet or want the sweet. So we would sort of cheat on that and, but of course give something that wouldn't affect their health. But I always liked the use of anagrams and things. And I thought COVID brought me an anagram right now, which I'm thinking, I don't repeat it. Like the C of the COVID taught me communication, better communication, compassion, increase that. It's, you cannot have a boundary of positive traits. So extend that boundary, push yourself further. They taught you patience. So obviously when you get the patience, the compassion came. The O gave us opportunity to think hard, to make ourselves grow, as human beings, working for the betterment and the, better quality of life for other people. And I think if you're open-minded and the moment you see someone happy, and more so if you've made them happy, I think that reverberates with higher force back at you. So it gave me the opportunity to think, like as I said, I never dreamt that we'd start doing online, and very successfully. We was the value. I mean, we've grown up in a home that valued people. So for me, it was very easy to adjust. So people who hadn't had the time or inclination, or they were too self-centered for whatever reason, I think they learned to value other people just as much as they value themselves. So I think the COVID, we both are that. I was the independence that you created in people with dementia to actually reassure them and make them feel that, no, I can do it. Simple thing like, feeding themselves. Like who wouldn't like being fed, sit back and everything, shoelaces tied and what you do for kids. But I think this phase made them feel independent, made them feel good. And they also must be in their own mind's eye thinking, why don't we innovate ourselves? Why don't we give them a shocking and a pleasant surprise to be better and giving them less work? And B, I thought was, something that we need to actually have a determination to align ourselves with other people. Unless we align ourselves with other people, life is going to be very tough. And more so in a closeted atmosphere that we are now having, with minimal interaction, minimal going out, or that's another. And, another thought, practical, what I thought was, which I must share with, it's quite a cute thing, wearing masks. Now, the family was very upset. They said, Madam, kaisa ho jayega? How are we going to do this? And all. I said, okay. I said, I'm very playful, So I said, okay. So what we did was, on our online sessions, before they actually made it mandatory, we started playing the mask game. And the mask game was preceded by the eyes, which slowly went to the mouth. And then it was this, keep quiet, open. And then we brought the concept of the mask. Okay. So these are ways in which you can hone your imagination and skills thereby. So this was an experience I have. Of course, there are a lot of challenges, but I'd rather not talk of them. I'd rather show the positive. So anybody listening will find caregiving a lesser challenge than what it is. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for sharing that very practical experience that you've had during this time working with people with dementia. I think that's a beautiful game that you describe. It really touches upon that whole, intergenerational aspect. I mean, I think this is just the kind of things that everybody could start doing in their homes. If you have a person living with dementia, to encourage them to maintain safety protocols. So I mean, I absolutely loved that particular game that you described. But on that positive note, I just want to turn to Dr. Banerjee, and of course, I mean, do share your thoughts on this. But also, wanted to ask you specifically a bit more about whether there's anything that we can actually do to prevent dementia, because we know there's currently no medical cure for it.
Yeah, thanks, Jashi. It's really good to get the insights from Vidyaji, and I think it's really a positive thing because it really makes people feel that caregiving is much less burdensome. I just like to add to that one, of course, there have been very definite, viable, practical challenges, including worsening of the course of dementia due to lack of social stimulation and other things. But one thing that has really come up great and due to COVID is, I think you all know that the Indian Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, together with the Indian Psychiatric Society, has released the telepsych. So we ourselves didn't know that, a simple call of 5 minutes, a simple video conversation of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, can actually keep so many symptoms in bay, can assure the caregivers, save them the burden of traveling, especially people who are in remote areas who are not able to come. So throughout this entire first wave and second wave, we have continued our helplines of the geriatric psychiatry unit of NIMHANS. We have continued the personal follow-ups that we have been doing of patients. And it was amazing. I mean, as simple as somebody having a sleepless night, someone trying to wander off, someone not being able to be engaged at home because all daycare centers were closed. They didn't have places to get them engaged. So as Vidyaji was mentioning, I think we really rediscovered a lot of new innovations, online ways, and especially for us consulting, online, which really can keep. And I think it is. I don't really like the term new normal a lot, but it can be considered to be future of at least dementia care or dementia consultations. Which brings me back to your question. So recently, World Psychiatric Association has brought out an absolutely new section called lifestyle psychiatry. And during my residency, if somebody told me this term, I would either think that they are joking or it's a new kind of trend, just an exotic term. But what really in all the meetings that led up to this section, a very important intersection was with old age psychiatry and dementia. In fact, I think we were discussing in our last meeting yesterday that the Lancet Commission report in 2020 has actually increased the number of modifiable risk factors for dementia, which was 8 initially, to now 11. And around 18 to 20% of the risk burden of dementia can be prevented, because we are not talking about a cross-sectional illness. We are talking about something which has a large window period. So even if we are able to delay the onset by even 1 year, that reduces the burden by nearly 25 to 30%. And these are not just statistics. These are proven with large data from global studies. But very importantly, there are some subtleties that I like to mention. Let's say many times we see that somebody has high BP, hypertension. The person has been having 140/80, 150/90 blood pressure, but a common notion is, chalo 160/70 to nahi hua, theek hai. we continue with the same. But there are recommendations mentioning that a strict control of blood pressure from midlife, as Sukanya was mentioning, you were mentioning that aging starts right from the time a person is born. It's not that a person will become 60, 65 years old and then you start the preventive policies or the preventive measures. Midlife, well control of blood pressure, regular checkup at least once in a year or once in 6 months, having a well control of blood sugar, and not to mention the importance of at least some form of physical exercise, social activities, staying cognitively involved, like, at least having some sort of leisure activities. Just so we always tell that you are watching the TV well enough, but just watching is not good enough. You discuss what you have watched with your family or relatives. So, and very importantly, having some sort of dietary regulation after a certain age. These may seem very generic. You may think you don't need a psychiatrist or a doctor to talk about this, but I, in my very limited experience, have seen people doing every single exotic stuff on YouTube, but neglects these basic things. So I think prevention starts when a person reaches 20, at least 30 years, and it continues thereon. So there is no, though in research purpose, we tell 60 years is the year at which a person turns older adult. In life or in prevention, it is not so. And I think as a society, we are really undermining the immense preventive potential that we have for illnesses like Alzheimer's. And there comes back to the concept of healthy aging where we started with.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for summing so much up so succinctly, Dr. Banerjee. I think this is something that we've really seen during our work with older adults through Samvedna, because we work not only in dementia care, but also with active aging. And I think one of the things that we are very keen to advocate more is that we need to think about what we can do much earlier. And it's not about just something that we need to do when we hit a certain landmark, a certain age. Do we need to start this at 60, 65, or should we be starting this at 30, 35? Or is this something that we should be doing, right from, our teenage years?
Jashi, just sorry to interrupt. So I suddenly remembered one of the very amazing writings that came up immediately after this Lancet Commission report in New York Times. And it started with this line: "It's never too early, it is never too late."
Absolutely. And on that note, I'm going to, I know that Vidyaji has another engagement to rush to, and there's something that, we'd really like her to do. It's an initiative that we want to take from Samvedna to really encourage this early start. I'd like you, Vidyaji, to launch this tracker. There's a calendar tracker of small events, things that anyone can do every day. I'm just going to share my screen and request Vidyaji to share her thoughts on this. So I'm not sure if you can let me know if you cannot. Can you see my screen?
Yes, please.
I can see the screen.
Great. So this is a calendar of things that you can do by yourself. Doesn't matter what age you are, doesn't matter where you are. Definitely, if you can encourage someone else to do this with you, it takes into consideration different aspects of things that I think we realized through various research studies are absolutely important for what Dr. Banerjee was referring to as lifestyle, changes. There's a focus on exercise, healthy nutrition, cognitive stimulation, self-care. And these are all really, really important things to do at any age. So Vidyaji, I'd like to invite you to launch this tracker, which is going to be available on our website. We would encourage you to share this with others. You can download it. I'll just share the site, where it is on our website. Try to do this. It's one activity a day. Try to do at least this. It's the bare minimum. every day, and encourage others to do this as well. Share this with adults who may be amotivated, not interested to do things. This is just a start. It's a very small baby step. So do download this, share it with others. You can print it, put it up somewhere, just tick mark what you do when you do it, and share that with us. Send us a photograph, send it in the email. We share the emails where we want you to kind of share those pictures with us. Share it with us on social media and let us know what you're doing to make this small change towards what is actually going to go a very long way. Vidyaji.
Yeah. Okay. Congratulations on my wellness tracker. I mean, even looking at it, I feel well already. So can you imagine what will happen if you're actually doing it? I think one day at a time is the way to go. One breath at a time is better. So what do? We start somewhere, and the calendar is the best because we keep looking at our watch all the time for various reasons. I think the calendar is an excellent tool for people to engage themselves, to, better their quality of life, and also know how far they've gone in that particular area of function, whether it's, taking pictures or playing a game or, going down memory lane. Even that is very therapeutic. Mental brain games, of course, because either you use it or lose it, they say. Walk and exercise, what is good for the heart is good for the brain. So I think this calendar lets us take our heart to our brain and the brain to the heart. And all the very best in this tool. And I'm sure people are going to benefit. And I think we should make it very popular and viral. Okay. So all the best for this creation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vidyaji. I'll just share where this is available on our website so that those of you who would like to download it can actually do so from there. So this is available on our website over here, and you can just click over here, download the wellness tracker. Ideally take a printout, put it somewhere, and as Vidyaji was mentioning, one day at a time. So small steps towards a larger change. So with that, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I know Vidyaji, you have a lot planned in the day.
But it's, I have to say, I'm very, very privileged to be with Sukanya and Debanjun. And we've made a start, and let's continue being in touch and do more and more for the community. Always there. And, there's a lot of things we can do together. Okay, divine grace and all the very best. And let it be the beginning of the many that are to follow. Yeah, take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jayashree and Archana, for having me. And even though it was like, I've just sent a message to someone. They said, come on. So I said, my circus tent is not gone down, the previous one. So when that comes down, I come into yours. So, okay. So all the very best. Okay.
Thanks, Vidya. Thank you so much for coming in. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you so much. But just to let our audience know that we do still have half an hour to really discuss with the panelists and with Vidyaji until she's available about any questions that they would like to put to the panelists, and also any points that they would like to discuss. I mean, we have one comment in the chat I can see about the importance of groups with other people in the same age group. How can they help each other? So maybe Sukanya, I could turn to you first for your thoughts on this.
Well, I'm a great believer in human connections because I feel that the currency of mental health, currency of, being or healthy aging is actually connections. And I think there's research to support that, to say that the secret to longevity is actually relationships, all-round relationships, not just about that one person in your life, but your relationship currency. So I think it's definitely worth investing in any form of relationships that are surrounding you in terms of same age groups, different age groups, intergenerational, bonds or just the people around, regardless of, caste, creed, any barrier at all. It's just relationships that's healthy for the brain. And also, when we were talking about COVID, I think that, COVID has been a game changer in terms of um, highlighting what isolation feels like. And therefore, the C of COVID could also mean the importance of connection for our brains. We really sort of felt how bad it feels when we don't have anyone to connect with. And that shows the importance of connection for our brains. So I feel that connections are, important not just post a certain age, but right from the beginning, if we can appreciate the importance of human bonds, and not just in terms of our immediate family, but also in terms of that sense of community that we can foster. And we are a collectivistic culture, we are not alien to this concept. So it's easier for our brains are already primed into it. So it's easier for us to actually propagate and promote this concept. I think that's a very important currency that can actually help in not just in terms of building a more resilient society, that can help in early detection and supporting people, whoever needs any sort of support, but also in terms of helping people bridge that gap. The more we are connected, there'd be less stigma, there'd be less any sort of hesitancy in reaching out. So I think that's again very, very critical in terms of building that social fabric, or just renewing that social fabric. I think COVID has given us that chance because it has opened up sort of pushed boundaries and opened up new ways of communicating. I sometimes think that if we actually had this pandemic 10 years back, when we didn't have such robust technology to connect us, how would we have dealt with it as a race? I think COVID has really sort of pushed that lesson really well, that, the importance of connection in several domains, with our friends, family, with our communities, even with, people who may not be from our own communities, from our own spaces. It's really important to sort of stay connected in various ways. So I think that would answer that question of importance of connecting with various groups and with other people in the same age group and help each other. So not just with the same age group, I think with different age groups, that's what the discussion has also been about, that can we sort of open up intergenerational barriers and let people just interact.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important point. There's I mean, just going on from this point, I think one thing that I'd like to put to the audience to really think about and share their thoughts on is, how can we make society more dementia inclusive? Now that COVID is we can't change what has happened because of COVID. I think there was a certain discourse on the importance of dementia inclusive societies pre-COVID, but what needs to be done, to make society as a whole more dementia inclusive? Just share your thoughts in the chat window, and we'd love to hear your comments and views on that. Dr. Debanjun, maybe I could ask you to take up this question from one of our audience members about yoga, pranayama, meditation, how they can delay the onset of dementia. And secondly, another very important aspect that I would also like to hear some thoughts from the audience about, in terms of how to deal with a sibling who doesn't want to share burden of taking care of a financially independent parent has dementia. So really, any thoughts on the costs or the burden, the economic burden of care of dementia? So,
Yeah, Jayesh, yeah. So I think it's a very pertinent question. Thanks for that. I was mentioning about physical activity and exercise, right? So there isn't really any one type of exercise. And I keep telling this in every single meeting or talk, that yoga or meditation or pranayama, whatever it says, it has nothing to do with spirituality or religion. I mean, of course, you can practice it as a spiritual practice, but it can also be practiced as an exercise, irrespective of your faith. So we do have an ongoing project right now in NIMHANS on the effect of yoga on, the decline of memory and how it impacts. Of course, it cannot be said to be a cure for dementia, but exercise in whichever form it is, if you are doing nothing, if you are just walking for 30 minutes a day, even that helps. And as Vidyaji mentioned, what helps your heart, what helps your body, helps your mind. So, but it should be consistent. It shouldn't be that 3 days you are doing yoga and 3 days you are in a sedentary lifestyle. So whatever form of exercise, whatever form of physical activity, and yoga also helps in concentration. It also helps in your, in your focus and your attention. So yes, it is extremely helpful. I would actually suggest that people continue it if you're doing that. But that doesn't necessarily mean, again, that if somebody had never done yoga or is not comfortable, in yoga throughout their life, today for preventing dementia, you have to start it. Whatever you were doing, if you were walking, continue that. If you are jogging, continue that. If you were gymming, if you were in aerobics, continue that. But be consistent with that. It should be a part of lifestyle. It should not be an additional work or a burden added upon on your day-to-day list. The second point, there have been several studies, including, the 10x66, which, many of us are familiar with. And not to go to the technicalities, my main point is that the direct medical burden of dementia is just the tip of the iceberg. The main cost comes, from the additional ancillary costs, the daycare, having a paid caregiver, having the need for hospitalization, the additional medical comorbidities, the other medical conditions, when the person may have behavior problems to deal with it, additional medicines. So it's a never ending process. And even though there can be a lot of positivity shared regarding this, to be very frank, the socio-economic burden of a family living with dementia is immense, and especially so in our country, where many places you do not get the three basic drugs that we have, donepezil, memantine, and rivastigmine or galantamine. We do not get it for free. So different hospitals are trying to subsidize it, trying to provide it for free, but still it's a havoc. One of the reasons, I know that it can be very individualized, why a person doesn't want to take care. I think what you actually meant in the question was a financially dependent person, not an independent person. So, one of the reasons why, what we have seen in our practice, why many family members do not want to take care is, it's probably, because they do not understand the illness. And they consider it, many times it's the stigma. They consider it to be a mental illness. They probably they have seen the individual when the behavior problems are too much, and they get scared of it. They don't understand how best they can take care of and forces which are available for support. And in fact, the longitudinal aging study of India, it's a huge study, one of its first kind in India. The first wave results are out last year. And even though there are so many schemes and, this ARTC, we have the Help Age India, the Age Well Foundation, you can't believe only 25% of people were actually aware that such things exist. So probably that's it. As I mentioned, every single person present here can actually be an advocate of carrying out this message to masses. And only then it snowballs. Because I always tell that sitting in a clinic in a tertiary care center hospital in India, I cater to the minimal amount of population. The maximum number of individuals suffering from dementia are in the community. So if we are not able to reach out to them, if we are not able to make them understand what we are dealing with, I think there is the barriers. And I'm sure that definitely there may be interpersonal issues related to not willing to take the burden of care, but at least a significant proportion can be changed and will be willing to help once they understand the problem, the premise of the problem, and the resources that are there to support. So I think spreading out the message becomes immensely important.
Absolutely, and I think one point that I just want to really emphasize is that yes, a lot of there's such a dearth of access to resources that can actually help people with dementia, and therefore it becomes even more important for every individual to not only to take part in dementia related advocacy, but also to support the care of people with dementia. I mean, a small example that we often share with people who come to us is that, if you can step in to provide someone who's caring for a dementia person living with dementia some respite care, that even that much goes a long way, because we know that costs of dementia care can be very. It's not just an economic burden; it's also a huge emotional burden as well. I'd like to invite people from the audience to actually share their thoughts. If anyone has any comments, any questions for our panelists, if anyone would like to share any suggestions or things that we could do as a society, I'd like to really invite you to, do that. Feel free to type in the chat box, or you can let us know, and you can unmute yourself and share your thoughts. I know Professor Srinivas Murthy has joined us. Sir, I was wondering whether you would like to share some of your thoughts. Could I request you to share some of your thoughts, sir?
Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It will be a pleasure to hear out to you.
I know that sir's already shared some of his comments in the chat, but sir, if you would like to share your thoughts, we would really look forward to hearing you as well. We've got some very interesting comments in the chat about celebrities talking about it will make a huge difference.
Jashi, I'd really like to make a point here. I saw this, and I'm sure it will make a difference. But let's not wait for the celebrities to talk.
Absolutely. Sukanya.
I always tell this. It's our collective responsibility. Each of us can talk about it. And if we wait for the celebrities to talk, we don't know when that will happen, because it has a lot of other factors underlying it. So let's start talking, and I'm sure that the others will join.
I think that we can really empower this conversation and make this. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
I know, just as I was listening to you, I was thinking that how will somebody join the conversation? So if I look back at how did fitness become such a big thing, it was the business opportunities that it generated. Whether it is the gyms, for example. So I'm just going back to two of the points that came to me in this. One is mental fitness as a concept. I think that can be a big thing. And is there a business opportunity for people in it? Because then it will spread. They will do the work for us. And again, to go back to that point on friendship groups, it is easy to say intergenerational, but when I look back on how much time did I spend with the people in the 80s and 90s in my family, and I think it's not, we can't expect that from the next generation as I grow older. And just like for the next generation, friends are becoming as important or more important than family. I find that the elders group that's sitting in the lawn seems to have some kind of support group within themselves. And how can we facilitate that? Not everybody lives in a colony or in an apartment complex. And of course, you can have platforms online, but after a point, you can't hold a phone or you can't read, but till then, say in your 60s and 70s, if you have enough of friends to talk to. I think just creating those platforms, I think, will help whoever wants to do that. And like everyone nowadays has a discussion on what's your diet and what are you doing for fitness. We should float that conversation on what are you doing for mental fitness. Everybody should say, I do a puzzle, or I do this, or I do that, or whatever. So those are my 2 bits. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your thoughts on that. I mean, I just like to take this opportunity to briefly also mention that we have a team of absolutely wonderful, passionate care specialists who connect with the older adults that we work with. And a lot of the people whom we reach out to, because they have mobility restrictions, etc. We see a lot of change once we provide that opportunity to them for socialization, interaction, just companionship. And these are really, really important aspects that you've brought out, ma'am. So thank you so much.
But you will know that there are not many people who are willing to come forward probably for that job as yet, but it will probably grow. And also not everybody can afford it. So it will take some time for it to get the momentum that it needs, but that's the best thing. To get if companionship can be a job, again, it has to be that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sukanya, I think you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, I think we are making some excellent points here. We are talking about intergenerational bonding. We are talking about how we can equate mental fitness with physical fitness, or make it fitness being more inclusive, not just physical fitness, but mental fitness as well. And we're also talking about bringing in ambassadors, not just in terms of being advocates, but we're also talking about bringing in ambassadors. I think what we could do here that could really sort of tie up all these loose threads is to involve the younger generation, because they are the trendsetters. They are the hashtag setters. The moment you create those hashtags, celebs will join it. The moment you get them going, you will get intergenerational bonding. You will have normalized conversations. You will have mental fitness as part of the whole fitness game. So I think I think the younger generation is where we need to really start. A, because it sort of looks like that's the missing piece. They can really sort of empower this movement. And B, we will then be building a wonderful dementia inclusive society for the next generation. So I think we need to start out with that bit.
Just to add to that, Jayashree, I think what Sukanya mentioned is very relevant, because that's a very strange similarity, that when we talk about mental health promotions or suicide prevention, it needs to start at base. So at schools, colleges, at youth clubs, and social media, these are the areas where both promotion, be it marketing, business, as well as outreach happens. So we cannot think of a dementia inclusive society in a vacuum. And having said that, I think it's also very important that, when we are talking about policies, when we are talking about interventions, when we are having discussion like this, like the last discussion that we had, it's very important that the voices of individuals living with dementia, their caregivers, are included. Because I always have felt this, I don't know, many of us may have felt this, that it's very important to understand what happens on the other side of the table to make a holistic step. Even though we tell non-judgmental, we tell that we have to be empathetic, we tell that we have to be considerate, every one of us have kind of our own understandings about the matter as a mental health professional or as a person working in dementia care. But it will only be complemented by the person who is affected, because these perspectives are not conflicting. I must say this, even being a medical practitioner, that many times, and we did actually quite a large scale study among the general physicians, in several districts of Bengal, to see what are the challenges that they face with terms of dementia care. And one of the very potent challenge was to break the diagnosis understand that when to refer to higher specialties. And finally, when they started having the behavior problems, of agitation, anger, sleep problems and stuff. And that time there was a lot of polypharmacy, doctor changing, immediate prescriptions. What the other side of, the table, what the care service users felt was that somewhere they were not involved in a collaborative dialogue. And I think that's very important, that when we are talking about a dementia inclusive society, when we are talking about a society where people can have, their behavioral problems, or, they may have issues with memory, and they will not be judged, they will not be frowned upon, they will not be stigmatized, will not discriminate them, there will not be health inequalities. For that, we have to involve the younger generation, as Sukanya mentioned, as Ms. Maithili mentioned about involving or creating business models which promote mental fitness and mental hygiene. At the same time, I think it's important for us to take a step back, involve the people who are there in the caregiving, take useful insights for them, and kind of, form a panel, a toolkit, or a wide arena of choices like medicines for people to select it from, rather than we taking a parental approach and prescribing stuff. I mean, that's my perspective solely as a physician working in the field of dementia care, but I'm sure that you'll resonate with it.
Absolutely, and it does, because I think one of the things that we very actively do at Samvedna is we run a support group for dementia caregivers, and that's really a platform where we encourage people to come share their experiences, share their challenges, and really learn from each other. And I think that's a wonderful platform where, even as a professional working in the area, it's wonderful to always get those new insights from people who are actually experiencing it every day. So definitely, I think that's really, really important, the points that you've raised. I think we have just one last question which we can touch upon briefly, because I think in a lot of ways you may have addressed some of it, but someone's raised the point of how can we deal with the shame and embarrassment that comes along with dementia and make societies more inclusive. And this could be from the perspective of the person who's living with dementia. I think we've touched upon issues of dignity, but also for caregivers. So maybe I could turn to you, Sukanya, first to share your thoughts, and then Dr. Banerjee before we wind up.
I think it's a very important question, and thanks, Vedika, for actually putting that up. Shame and embarrassment is, related to some of those cultural barriers that we discussed. So, it's going to be a slow process to sort of unlearn those cultural, sort of societal conditionings that we are, invariably we are exposed to that. It will take some time for that unlearning to happen. But I think let's make this a little more action oriented. I think the whole purpose of observing the day, the month, and this discussion as well, and all the work that Jayashree Samvedna is doing and Dr. Banerjee is doing, the whole idea is to actually sort of fuel this movement. So I think we'll need to sort of look at what can be done on a proactive basis. So I really like the idea that Dr. Banerjee brought up, that we need to look at the multiplicity of voices, not just the lived experiences of someone who has gone through probably a more debilitating aspect of the disease, but also others who have been through the milder forms or been able to manage it. So I think those multiplicity of voices is something that needs to come into space. In fact, while we were talking about it, I was wondering that, as I'm sure that Samvedna would be doing some of this in this month, but I was just wondering, all the people present here, all of us, if we could just sort of start sharing it on our social media platform, just one hashtag that maybe some of the youngsters here would come up, and we sort of let it snowball. That could be the beginning of unlearning the shame and deconstructing the shame and the embarrassment. Because if everyone talks about it, the conversation becomes normal.
Absolutely. Dr. Banerjee, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, See, social media is really a very, very important and useful platform to reach out. We do talk about so many side effects or so many adverse effects of social media, but we really forget that how it can be such a powerful, immensely powerful tool for mental health promotion. I mean, it helps so much to snowball our message. And I really thank you for the question, because not only as a mental professional, but also for as a caregiver, I have understood that there are times, especially in social occasions, that you really feel that shame, you feel that embarrassment, and then that makes you retire in your shell all the more, and you don't want to discuss about it. I think both myself and Jayashree, we were having a discussion yesterday, and we did come across a caregiver who was also mentioning about this anger and resentment now that the individual is no more, as to how the person used to behave. One useful way, I would say, is many of us, when the diagnosis first happens, we are bewildered. Why is the person behaving so bizarrely? What is happening? So understanding what is happening, because it's ironic as it may seem, but it is not really a mental illness. It is not really in that way a physical illness. So the person starts kind of losing his or her identity gradually, and that makes it all the more difficult for a person to put things in perspective. So acceptance will not come in the beginning. Acceptance will only come once you understand what is happening. And then there will be a point when there will be certain issues with behavior, certain things which you will resent, which will make you angry. But it's always, important to understand. I know it's easier to tell than to do, but it's important to understand that these are certain symptoms, as one of you have mentioned, that diabetes, hypertension, thyroid issues, COVID now. So, like any other illness, dementia is an illness, Alzheimer's is an illness, and there are certain things that come out of illness, and there are certain behaviors which can be managed. And that brings me to the context of two things. One, there can be significant caregiver burnout. So that is one of the main reasons why the shame and embarrassment increases. To have, to harvest as much social support as you can, both financially and socially, emotionally. If there is somebody else to help you out, if there are multiple people involved in the care, that's best. And the second is that if you are having any problem which is making you feel that you will not be able to continue the care anymore, then please feel free to discuss that with a professional help. Because I think the entire purpose of this discussion is to destigmatize dementia care, and let at least this come out as a message from this year's World Alzheimer's Month, which will be my personal request, is that we all need help when we have to. So if you are facing challenges, if you are feeling that it is going over the board, do not wait for your last line to be stretched. There are professionals, we all are there to help you out. I'm sure that there will be no one who will tell that don't come to us. So reach out, seek help, be informed, and I'm sure that there is something that all of us have to do. And trust me, the best possible interventions, ways, methods that have come out for managing issues related to Alzheimer's have come from the caregivers, not from any medical textbooks.
If I could just add to that, Jashri, I think shame is something that many of us may have felt at various times while we were getting sensitized into this whole discourse. I have experienced that personally as well. But what really stood out for me and what really empowered me to come out of that shame was the acknowledgement and the appreciation that I received when somebody saw me caring for my parents. So I think that sense of empowerment, so sometimes we even feel shame for feeling the shame. So we need to start from there. We need to start acknowledging people who are taking care of, who are caregivers. I think that could be a very empowering space. So just wanted to sort of share that.
And I think on that very positive note from both our panelists, I'd like to thank them for their time and for this very interesting discourse, and also for the audience for engaging in with us in this discourse and really being part of this important conversation. We've discussed a whole plethora of issues. We've discussed the kind of challenges that have led to a barrier, really too early detection of dementia. Some of these challenges, as we've discussed, are as deep rooted as probably being part of our very, our culture, our very ethos, the way that we're actually we're hardwired to think. And so, therefore, I think one of the very important messages is really about how we should think of starting to advocate about this change in our homes itself. So each one of us, I think, really needs to take a lot more ownership about creating awareness, destigmatizing, and sensitizing. We've spoken about the need for more inclusive societies, about how we should break barriers of shame, embarrassment, because that's really what pulls down a lot of caregivers. That's what also impacts people living with dementia. And really, we should look at how we can develop societies which are less stigmatizing, more accepting of dementia as a problem and a challenge. And we really need to do this now. Through this month, and this is an endeavor that we've been doing at Samvedna for a while to increase awareness and destigmatize help seeking, we've been conducting screening camps. So I saw that there were a couple of questions in the chat about that. Our next screening camp, these are free screening camps that we conduct online, is on the 27th of this month. And we periodically continue these screening camps. So please do share the link which is in the chat. You'll find these details also on our website and our social media handles. We really want to debunk this myth of, that dementia is really a part of normal aging. We really want to encourage people to seek help early. And there's no problem with getting a brief assessment done to understand if things are fine. But if there is something which is of concern, a professional can help you understand that so much earlier and then work with the person who is living with dementia as well as their family to minimize some of the other challenges that we've also talked about. I thank the panelists for their time. There's a host of resources that are in the chat, and I think all of these are really wonderful resources that Dr. Banerjee has shared. Do look at our website as well. We regularly publish blogs which are very simply written for anyone to understand. I know that there are a lot of professionals in the audience today, but do share these blogs with patients, caregivers, for better understanding of challenges, mental health issues, or what tips on what to do in various circumstances. So with that, I'd like to thank our panelists, and I'd just like to invite Archana, she's the founder of Samvedna, to share her thoughts before we close. Archana.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jayashree. So first of all, I must congratulate you all for the wonderful, insightful discussion we had today. And thank you, Dr. Debanjun and Sukanya, for coming in and sharing your thoughts. When we were discussing about what will we discuss this year as a part of our annual program, we really wanted to, we have been working with dementia for the last 7-8 years now. And awareness is the biggest challenge. And we thought that, let's open this question as to, what is society's role in taking this conversation forward. And I think we have had some very interesting discussion points. I hope, there are around 40 people today here. If each one of you will go and talk about dementia to at least 4 or 5 people, we are already creating that network of how this message can get propagated. And they in turn will talk to another 4. So, like somebody was talking about making it, like mental fitness also a part of a a game or something to look forward to. I think those are very interesting conversations. So I'd just like to thank everyone, all of you, for coming in and sharing your thoughts. And thanks, Jayashree, over to you.
So on that note, thanks again to everyone, and let's keep that ball rolling and keep this momentum on. Let this not be restricted to just another webinar. So do spread the message and do keep this with you, in your daily work. Do spread that message. So thanks a lot, everyone.
And do
Thanks,
download the
Jayashree.
wellness tracker. So do download the wellness tracker and share it with your parents or with anybody you would like to. And let's, like Vidya said, let's make it viral. Yeah.
So help us do that.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thanks
lot,
all.
everyone.
Take care. Stay safe. Thanks, Sukanya. Thanks, Archana. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Please take care.